Disclaimer: this documentary contains graphic imagery and adult themes.
Parents need to be empowered to decide what their own children are playing. So, with the law gone now officially, what do locals have to say about their kids and violent video games?
I strongly feel that if you have a small child, they should be playing those type of games.
These kids are 7 years old, and yet they're playing video games that are for teen, 10 plus, and hence are mature. You wouldn't want kids this young watching an R-rated movie.
Now, first off, let's all agree that aggression is a very common byproduct of playing video games.
But kids don't just cross a highway. You know, they're not going to walk across the highway for no reason. This thing had her walking across a highway to find a Pokemon. When she called and said that she was hit by a car, I blamed the game, because she would not have been out of my house.
And also video games. I'm hearing more and more people say the level of violence on video games is really shaping young people's thoughts.
What happened? I know that might be an ambiguous question to ask, so allow me to explain. Gaming. More specifically, violence in gaming. I asked the question, how exactly did we get from this to this? This is a question that I and many others have been asking. Just like any form of media, games can affect us both positively and negatively. But the question is, are violence and gaming actually linked? I'm going to be looking at both sides of the argument today to see if the argument still holds up. This is Gunz or gaming. To truly talk about this argument, we're going to have to look at where it all started. Arcade games started in the early 70s and peaked in popularity during the 80s. When you ask people what they thought the most controversial game of that time was, many people think of Mortal Kombat. However, the first game to ever cause arguments, studies, and even controversy was actually a much simpler game called Death Race. In 1976, Death Race was released. The game was meant to be an adaptation of a film with the same name. As the film was graphic and violent, it was only logical the game would follow the same style. The aim of the game was to run as many people over as possible. While this does sound very graphic, the game's visual style is simple and doesn't show any blood. However, people complained that the characters screaming and a grave appearing in their place may be too much of a violent concept, especially for youth. The game was eventually pulled from shelves because of this. This game is clearly nothing to the level of graphic violence we have in recent gaming. So the question is, how will people react to this game now? What do you think this game is about and what target audience do you think it has?
I think this game looks really similar to that other game where it's like two sides and they have to like stop getting a ball.
Oh, you mean Pong?
Yeah. Is it not Pong?
No, it's not.
It looks like Pac-Man, but a really weird version. I don't really know what's going on.
Looks like you got a car maybe.
So this is an early computer game, very early. It looks like the player is trying to avoid the monster.
So is that meant to be like a monster or something? It's like the monster's like coming at the people and then like just putting up a gravestone. You get like an ah.
I kind of find it funny.
It's like really weird. That's not why what I expected it to be.
In the 70s, this was the most controversial video game.
No.
Well, like if I was a little kid, like 10-year-old or whatever, going into an arcade, and I saw this, I would just think it was something like completely innocent.
It doesn't seem graphic and it doesn't feel violent, even though the topic sounds like it should be.
So it's no lie that games have increasingly pushed the boundaries of how graphic they can be. But what exactly caused them to spike so dramatically? After the backlash death rates caused, what caused games to not only continue to release violent and graphic content, but increasingly get worse? Much to my surprise, I found a much more intense and disturbing game came out as soon as 10 years later. In 1986, the arcade game Chiller was released. Unlike Death Race, which doesn't seem bad at first glance, Chiller, well, speaks for itself.
Although the graphics are really quite poor compared to what you would see today, it's quite graphic, it's quite explicit in its violence and gore and blood.
I don't know, the colours and the text sort of looks a bit like a Frankenstein-y theme. And like the name Chiller reminds me of Michael Jackson.
I don't want to watch it.
Is it a bit too much?
It's just weird. I don't understand the concept of it.
Basically just torturing people.
Okay, well,
But that's just a regular Thursday.
yeah.
There's just so much going on, I can't...
Bit of a step up from the last game, isn't it?
Yeah! There's like actual bodies and like, it looks like a man's wearing a thong.
So, clearly games of all genres and age groups have been experimenting with different themes for years. But the question is, are the effects on players positive or negative?
I do, when I read these articles about, kids that are stuck in their room for days on end, playing these games in a darker room, I mean that can't be healthy. And if it is violence, particularly very violent, I can't really see that could be a good thing. Is it how difficult is it to draw that line with reality and fantasy? I don't know really, but I would say that they shouldn't be as violent as the one that I saw.
It's not to do with whether the language is adult or not, but there is some language, whether it's even if it's adult in nature, that depending on your sensibilities you can find funny, and some stuff that you just wouldn't accept being said anywhere.
Like nudity, guns, swearing, but then coming to kill people with the guns, and like prostitution, I think it's just, I don't think they should be brought out because it gives younger people the wrong idea.
We have seen evidence of people getting injured at opening events with games such as Grand Theft Auto. People have been stabbed, hit with bricks, and worst case scenario, they've been killed. However, events like Black Friday and opening nights are usually filled with violent and overloaded people in general. There obviously won't be opening nights for the new Animal Crossing, so violent people at Grand Theft Auto opening night seems plausible because of the bigger and obsessive fan base. A popular TV series, Rick and Morty, made a reference to the McDonald's Szechuan sauce. McDonald's brought the sauce back for 1 week, but this immediately backfired as fans were arguably aggressive towards the staff. While Rick and Morty does contain violent and graphic scenes, it doesn't have nearly as much adult content as Grand Theft Auto. So, if this shows us anything, it's that certain people will get aggressive over what they like, no matter what that may be.
So I don't think it depends on the age in which the person plays, it depends on the person themselves.
Call of Duty can be considered an essentially violent game, but do you feel you would copy anything you see from a game in real life?
I wouldn't like that to be true and real.
Do you feel games can help you in a positive way? Like after you finish playing a game, you can feel happy?
Yeah. As long as they could address what they're addressing in the games in reality to, say, their parents or their friends, then that would be okay. It would be if they went down the lines of that was their dependence and the only way that they could deal with things or address things, I think that wouldn't be right. I think there'd need to be a balance of both.
My name's Seren. I'm the Senior Programme Manager at Brain in Hand, and in my role, I work a lot with people with different types of conditions and different types of I suppose who want to use Brain in Hand for different reasons, basically in different settings. And so sometimes that might be using Brain in Hand for support with independence or supporting with anxiety. So I definitely do think gaming can help people with social anxiety. So from my experience, and I've worked with Brain in Hand for a long time, I've seen a number of people who will use gaming perhaps as a distraction if they are feeling anxious. It can quite often be a good distraction from if there's a particular problem going on. It's a good way of kind of taking their mind out of it and actually focusing it on something else.
There is no doubt that playing a violent game can make people feel thrilled due to the adrenaline. However, gaming is not the only thing that does this. The aim of a sad movie is to make the audience feel for the characters, and some people may even feel sad after watching the film. However, these emotions don't last. A sad film won't cause depression, so why would a violent game make someone violent? Multiple studies have shown that video games actually have a very positive effect on players. They improve motor skills, better decision making, heightened concentration, just to name a few. But what about the effects on younger people? Well, it can have a positive effect on them too, particularly children with special needs. Games like Ortcraft, a private Minecraft server that have improved the lives of autistic people massively, made a huge difference.
Hi, I'm the Involvement Coordinator at Dimensions. That's an organisation that supports people with learning disabilities and autism. I'm an autism ambassador. I'm a mum of 3 children with autism, and I run a support group called Minecraft and Meltdowns. I don't think that a violent game will make somebody violent in the same way that going to a violent group won't make somebody violent. I would think there's something within that person anyway that attracts them to that kind of game. We also know soldiers who play Call of Duty quite happily because it's an entirely different situation from the real world. There's no chance of dying, it's very easy to play, you're very comfortable, it's completely different to being on the front line.
So, what can we really take from all this? Well, first, we can consider what we've covered. We have seen little evidence that violence and gaming are actually connected. We have seen more positive effects than negatives, but video games will always depend on the player. A film may be rated a PG, but that doesn't mean every child is going to be disturbed by the film. It depends on their sensitivity. The same can be said about gaming. Arguably, our sensitivity has changed over the years too. Some forms of media in the 80s would get backlash from audiences today, considering how much it's complained about. People complained about the new Peter Rabbit because they made a joke about allergic reactions, while films like Watership Down contained horrific scenes of animal death, was passed off as a U. Are we growing more sensitive to media, or have we just learned to stand up to it? No matter how far this industry goes in future, there will always be graphic content, and there will always be violent people. As long as those things are around, people will always find something to blame.